I have the pleasure to spend the morning with Jerry Colangelo. Jerry, how are you?
I'm fine this morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good, Tom.
Well, you've had a fantastic career. And I think what's very interesting and what I hope to be able to capture today is how much more is still left and how much you're doing right now in business and specifically here in Arizona. But if we could take a few steps back, I know that you've written a number of books and I know that a number of things have been written about you, but in terms of a 14-year-old sitting at home watching this on the internet, what should they know about Jerry Colangelo and your background?
I think one of the important messages is that only in this country can someone succeed and have a level of success without being born into it, like is the case in so many countries around the world. And you don't have to be a blue blood. Opportunity is there in front of people if they recognize it, and most people don't see that opportunity because they're busy fretting about their circumstances. So eyes and ears open, being willing to take a risk, a gamble, and with that kind of a mindset, the sky is the limit for anyone. So a 14-year-old wondering about what he or she's future might be, it's unlimited. It's really, what do they want out of life? Are they willing to pay the price, whatever that price might be? But opportunity is there.
Before the interview, we had a chance to talk a little bit about the influence that parents have on us and driving us. How much of an impact did that have on you? What drove you to success in life?
You know, everyone's journey is a little bit different, so it's difficult to categorize people or circumstances. I didn't have much of an influence in terms of my family life pushing me to do anything. I mean, it was kind of self-imposed, if you will. I think sports, athletics were a factor with me, coming from a poor ethnic community where people respected one another. We understood the priorities in life: faith, family, business, neighborhood. I got my foundation right there, so I understood as I watched people come home every day with a lunch bucket that life was difficult, life was tough. But as I looked across the street at the railroad tracks and wondered, how do I ever get on the other side of those tracks? How do people make that conversion? It was sports that gave me the impetus to say, I can do that.
Now, you've had an amazing career in sports, even up until today working with the U.S. basketball team, which has had an unbelievable run. It's been very, very fun to watch as a sports fan. Talk about the transition from sports to business. What was the impetus, and what was that journey like, making that transition?
Well, first of all, I would say that sports is a multi-billion-dollar business. There's incredible value today. It wasn't always that way. When I was part of the Chicago Bulls startup, it was something considerably less, but it was a business. And the concept was to try to make ends meet, pay the bills, and end up with a profit at the end of the year, meanwhile trying to win. And so it was a great combination of all of those factors. And what I've seen in my 45 years that I spent in the NBA, in just about every capacity. I was a marketing guy, I was an assistant to the president, I was the GM, I was the coach, and eventually put a deal together to put an ownership group in a position to buy a professional team, the Phoenix Suns. And so I was the first person who had done all of those things from within the system. Usually when you look at ownership today, they made money in banking or hedge funds or selling widgets. It wasn't that they were involved in basketball their whole lives, and I'm using basketball as an example. Well, that's true of every sport. So I had that privilege, and it was a wonderful journey for me, and I saw this whole thing evolve into as I say, a multi-billion-dollar industry that is only getting bigger all the time.
The good to great model is to get the right people on the bus. Mm-hmm. And so you've brought up something that I think identifies a certain school of thought in recruiting from within, the value of having somebody come up through the organization and then be an owner. Obviously, that's worked very well. There are other businesses that look to recruit from outside, to bring in a different culture. What's your philosophy on that? And if there's somebody that's starting a new business that's looking how to hire the right people, do you have any advice for that person?
Well, first of all, I'm always in favor of promotion from within. When people pay their dues and show loyalty to a company, and there are opportunities for advancement within that company, you want it to be from within rather than outside. To think that people can start from the bottom and end up in ownership is a little bit of a reach and more difficult each day as the numbers have increased so much. The high price tags for most anything you're looking to buy kind of put it out of reach of most people. So I think the advice I would give to young people within a company is that shoot high, look for advancement, look for opportunities, and remember this, your first job is not your last job. Your first job is only your first job. Chances are you'll move 5 or 6 or 7 times in a lifetime, and just keep looking for opportunities. Life is relational. The more people you meet, the more bridges you build, and opportunities come around. That's what usually happens.
One thing that we have in common is a belief in Arizona's future, that this is a place that's going to end up being very, very important in the Southwest, especially with transportation. And I think it's in our DNA to be successful more than just surviving. How did you end up in Arizona? Why did you stay in Arizona? Why do you continue to do business in Arizona?
Back in the early pioneer days, I'm not being facetious when I say that, 1966, I was part of the Chicago Bulls startup. It was the first expansion team of the modern era, and I was 26 years old. Didn't realize that I was a young guy in what was to become a growth industry very quickly. And so a year and a half later, Phoenix and Milwaukee were added as expansion teams, and I had opportunities to become a GM in either one of those cities or stay in Chicago. And as it turned out, I took Phoenix, and I was the youngest GM in professional sports at that time when I came. And my story, many people are aware of here in the Valley, is that I had 3 kids, 2, 4, and 6, $300 in my pocket, and my wife and I and the kids got on a plane and came to Phoenix, and we never looked back. Now, why Phoenix, to your question? I saw a blank canvas here. That's what I really saw. It was a young community. It was vibrant, in my opinion. It was an opportunity to be a trailblazer, if you will. Anything I might do in my area of interest would be something done maybe for the first time. And there weren't any things to hold me back. In other words, this was a land of opportunity, and I recognized that, and it was a small town by comparison back then in 1968 when I arrived here. So I saw the opportunity. I fell in love with the state. I fell in love with the people, very friendly people, and it was pretty evident that the door was wide open to make it if you did things appropriately. And I've tried always in my life to be a man of principle and do what I say and stand for my word being my bond. And so I developed a lot of relationships early on in my career here, and that led to even more opportunities as it turned out.
And what's the future of Arizona as you see it today?
Well, the growth of what's going to take place in our country is going to be in the West. And we have some major needs in terms of infrastructure in the western part of the United States. If you saw a grid of the United States, you'd see the heavy concentration of interstates and tollways and everything else on the East Coast. And you get to the Mississippi River and then you fall off a cliff because there's so little beyond the Mississippi. If all of the growth is going to be west, we need infrastructure in the west, and we will be a major hub, we being Phoenix, because of that tremendous growth that's going to take place. And also situated between two of the world's biggest economies, the state of California, the country of Mexico. So we are strategically located to have an amazing impact economically over the next 2-3 decades without question.
In sports, you have a history of winning. In business, you have a history of winning. What's your philosophy on competition, and how is that transferred from the business of sports to the business of business?
Well, many successful people in sports have had a great impact in the world of business if they actually transition out of sports business into something different than that. That's the competitive nature of the people within sport. That's just the way it is. And there are certain things you become. Coach Krzyzewski at Duke, who is a dear friend of mine and the coach of the U.S. Olympic team, an organization that I chair, is one of the great leaders in this country. He's a mentor. He's a great coach, but I'm going to put that third or fourth. It's he as the person that he is, the quality of a person that he is, that makes him so extraordinary. People who are committed to winning and have a good plan and a good program and have stick-to-itiveness and are willing to pay the price, again, the sky is the limit. A good example is he just won another championship recently at the Final Four, and the next day he was out recruiting the next day. He wasn't resting on his laurels. So that's just a classic example. I think when you find people who are successful, they're successful in anything they do. Mm-hmm. It just be part of your DNA over a period of time. And I mean, honestly, in my case, playing on the playgrounds, playing in the alleys, playing ball, wherever I could, competing against bigger, stronger competition gets you ready, for the real world. And so I'm thankful that I had a little bit of talent, God-given talent, that gave me an opportunity to get an education, to meet a lot of people, to get a lot of exposure. I've traveled the world. I've been with kings and presidents of countries. It's been an amazing journey for me, and I owe it to a ball. I remember being inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2004, and I told the story that when I was 7, someone handed me a basketball, and I smelled it. And I smelled the leather, and it just did something to me. In fact, it was the beginning of a love affair that's lasted my entire lifetime. So there's always a reason or a beginning for something that took place, and that has driven me. There was an old immigrant in our neighborhood who one night as a 10-year-old pointed to a star in the sky, and he said, "Jerry, do you see that star?" And I said, "Yes, Mike, I do see it." He says, "Remember this, it's better to be in that star for one day than never get there at all." So the advice I give young people is shoot for that star. Don't be afraid to fail. That's what life is all about. All that matters is who's standing last. You will only learn from the mistakes you make, not from the wins you acquire. So through this journey, life journey that we each have, it's all going to be a little bit different challenges and so forth, but it's a great life.
An interesting correlation between getting the right players on a team, getting the right people to work for you. Mm-hmm. What's the secret to recruiting?
First of all, teams win, not individuals. It's as simple as that. When I took over USA Basketball, I de-emphasized the names of the players on the uniforms, but I emphasized USA on the uniforms because it was all about USA Basketball. It wasn't about the individuals. Once you develop a team concept in a business environment, in a team environment, and people buy in, that's the key. You need buy-in. And if you have good leadership at the top, where it starts, and it flows all the way through an organization, then you have a great opportunity to accomplish your goal.
So let's talk about marketing and sales. For some, it comes very easily. For others, the challenge is to recruit the right people that can sell their product. What's your philosophy on sales and marketing?
Well, I'm a marketing guy. You know, inherently, that's the way I am. And it's because there's a word I haven't used yet, is passion. You know, passion goes a long way toward making one successful in anything you're doing. So if you have knowledge of a product and you're passionate about that product, you have a pretty good chance to be successful in selling it. And so I was once told, if you could sell rags, in other words, like clothes or whatever, you could sell anything. So a little experience in working behind the counter, selling newspapers, anything that you can as a young person to get some work experience will help hone you for the next level of experiences. So passion is a very important word.
We live in a very litigious environment, a very litigious business community, and I think it's important for people starting out to understand how to work with lawyers and how to understand the law. What's your philosophy when it comes to attorneys?
Well, I think what you just said is pretty important. We're the most litigious country in the world by far. We have more lawyers in our country than any country in the world. Maybe you can add all the other countries and the total number of lawyers, and we're still ahead of the game. So it's a reality. Be aware of that, so be represented by a good lawyer. I've always had that in my particular case. I understood my limitations. You know, in terms of schooling, I thought I was going to coach and teach. I took business courses along the way, like business law and accounting and economics, and over a period of years, when you're doing billions of dollars of deals, like I had the pleasure of doing and are continuing to do, you'll learn a lot by osmosis. But don't fool yourself. When you get right down to the nitty-gritty, you better have strong representation, people who have expertise in that particular field. And that's what we try to do in our business, in the real estate business. We surround ourselves with the right people. It's a team effort.
Why is competition so important in business?
Because it's a tough world out there. You know, there are a lot of people who may have the same goals and motives that you do. And so there may only be one winner when it's said and done. So if you do things on the up and up and you give it your best effort and you're really prepared, you have a legitimate shot at being successful. Competition is something that is also inherent. I don't think you learn to be a competitor. I think that has to come from within, and then it just kind of develops as you have more and more experiences. So I'm a firm believer that every person should throw himself into the action, engage wherever they can, learn to be competitive as best you can, and then rely on your inner self to make things, put you in a position to be successful.
Do you have a favorite business book?
I've read so many books. I've been associated with so many of the top marketing people in the world, and I've learned so much from each and every one of them. I think the other thing that's really important in life is don't ever be happy with where you are. Always try to get better. You know, here I'm 75 years old today. I don't feel that. I feel in great shape. I work hard at trying to keep myself mentally and physically at the best I possibly can. But I learn something every day. I seek to learn something every day. You need to be active. Keep your mind active, your body active, and you'll get a lot more time out of it, I believe.
What drives you today?
It's not about money. It's not about success. You know, there's a book that a fellow named Buford wrote maybe 15 years ago about life's journey and going from success to significance. I read that book at the time, and it had an impact on me, and but I understood it because I just have always believed this. You know, in my case, I believe God gave me a platform. My life and the success I've had doesn't make sense when you really break it down. Why me? Why not other people who maybe were more educated or came from a different environment or might have taken things to another level? I can't answer that. I just know that that was my lot, that was my calling, and I take that platform pretty seriously. Inherently, again, I knew and believed that you have to give back. And it's not about how much money you have or how many possessions you have. What is success in the first place? Success is being happy. One of my very dear friends, who's now deceased, back in Chicago, lived in the same home for 45 years, paid about $10,000 for the home, put 4 kids through college. He never made over $60,000 or $70,000 a year in his life. That's success. He had a great life. So everything is relative. And so I would encourage people that it's not all about money, it's not all about wins, it's not all about glory, it's being happy in your position in life.
I want to thank Jerry Colangelo for spending some time with us today. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
If you're interested in starting a business, go to the Arizona Corporation Commission website at azcc.gov. And best of luck in your entrepreneurial endeavors.